Hey guys, it's Friday, May 10th. It's 4 o'clock Central Time. So I am back to my usual schedule. For a lot of you, you haven't seen me for a while because for 2 weeks I was covering the United Methodist General Conference, and that required all of me, including on Fridays. So it's been a pretty action-packed week, I don't know, 3 weeks. So I'll give a report on that. But first, I just want to greet those of you who are with us. Hey, Jennifer and Jeff. Yeah, you're right. And Holly. We got two friends from Michigan back to back, Ann and Tom. Hey, Evie and Monty and Jonathan from Louisiana, and Dee from Texas, and Brenda from Alabama. We got, I don't know, another 30 people with us. So glad to have y'all. As soon as you're comfortable, sign in, let us know where you're from, and if you have anything you want to make sure that we talk about today. I had a few topics that I knew that we needed to cover, or need is not the right word, but that I thought I could enjoy talking about for a bit. And then, I always like being responsive. It's a lot of fun talking with people. So anyway, yeah, just let me know what I can talk about in our time together. um, who was it? Paul Prebill wrote a question down before I got the chat overlay option on. So if you type it again, I'll bring it on. But we'll talk about that here in a bit. Hey, Suzanne, good to see you, sister. Um, let's see. I should give a report on what has transpired the last 3 weeks because it has been pretty fun. I started off plain spoken with a kind of high aspiration. I wanted to affect the outcome of the United Methodist Church's General Conference. And I knew that from the beginning that was a very ambitious and naive thing to hope for. But um, I knew from the inside I couldn't say what needed to get said. And I hoped that by getting outside of it and speaking the truth in love and calling attention to the things that are a problem, that enough of the delegates at General Conference would be able to see just how bad things had gotten and listen to me and stop this course that they were on. And it didn't happen that way at all. I had hoped to protect the legacy and the heritage of, I think a vast majority of United Methodists on the grassroots level are not real excited about going on this very far left campaign of progressive wokeism. But that's just not who is in charge, and the powers that be produced a very scripted, very controlled event that manufactured consent, and they got everything they wanted. So, even my Considering Charlotte series that was intended to, there were United Methodist voices heading that up, representing the grassroots of the denomination. I had hoped that would sway things. I didn't imagine that a conservative majority would take over. I imagined that the progressives that took over would understand just how awful it would be if they did what they did and they bulldozed the majority world and black and brown people around the world to get what they wanted. And there's this thing called luxury beliefs. I'm going to see if I can't pull it up really quick on my Twitter because it's just now occurring to me that this was a really good insight on the nature of yeah, okay, it's right here. Rob Henderson. This is what I understand to be the culture that took over. And oops, that's not the right button. Excuse me 1 second. Um, that took over at the General Conference and is now going to be represented in the United Methodist Church. Rob Henderson is an amazing thinker, if you don't know, by the way. He says it's not the working class that sees the police as an unnecessary evil and opposes rigorous enforcement of the law for public safety and public order. If you've ever heard defund the police, that's not the working class. It's not the working class, number two, that believes public consumption of hard drugs should be tolerated with intervention limited to reviving addicts when they overdose. Three, it's not the working class that believes many crimes like shoplifting should be decriminalized because punishing the perpetrators would have, quote, disparate impact, end quote. For it is not the working class that believes you should never refer to illegal immigrants as illegal and that border security is somehow a racist idea. Anyway, it obviously goes on from there. I don't need to go through the whole thing, but what Rob Henderson is known for coining is the term luxury beliefs, that there are certain beliefs that can only be maintained without knowing it's a joke by people of a certain upper class that are detached from reality. And that's what took over the general conference in the United Methodist Church in the last couple weeks. And I got to chronicle the whole thing. I went to the live stream and I restreamed it in this exact format. And 73 is the number of combined people we have watching right now. But man, on my last day of live streaming, there were almost 800 people on the live stream with me. I forget what the final biggest count was, but it was huge. So many people were very interested in following along, and they were really engaged, because if you just watch it by yourself, it's really hard to track what's happening. So I just provided the connecting tissue and what was related to what and who has been responsible for what and how things are related. And I got dozens, if not over 100 emails saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. This was wonderful. This is what I needed. So it was a really good experience for me too, because there were a lot of people in the chat, especially Matthew Sickle and Matthew Conover. Both of them were amazing resources for me, just helping me understand what was going on and helping the audience understand. Of course, we had some hecklers, had to kick out the hecklers. You shouldn't live stream if you don't want to deal with hecklers. But it was all a worthy time. It was really good. I made some good advertising money on YouTube because I would, publish it afterwards and let there be ads. But then on the last day, I get up and there's a copyright violation against me. The United Methodist Church hired a lawyer to file against me on YouTube, and I got 2 out of 3 strikes. If I'd gotten a third strike, the whole channel would have been destroyed. That would have been so awful, because I've been building it up for a year and a half. So anyway, I've been going back and forth with that lawyer, and they insist that I broke copyright law, but it seems pretty clear to me and some others that what I did is covered by fair use law, where my face was over top of it. I did a lot of my own stuff where we weren't even looking at the live stream. I offered commentary over the whole time. I had thousands of comments that I brought on screen and engaged with. So in general, fair use law applies when you radically change the nature of the original broadcast to be something completely different. And so I think I upheld that. I on the last day, I only live streamed to Facebook and Twitter because YouTube, I didn't want that third strike. And that's when I got the highest viewership, which is just crazy. But I put a little caption over top just saying, this is not the opinion of the United Methodist Church, because that was supposedly one of the concerns that the lawyer said the denomination had. So anyway, it went really well. I don't know if I'm going to see any of that money that I made now that a copyright violation is going to be filed. And of course, a lot of people think I'm a grifter because I care about money. Well, I don't know how many. I've heard one person say it, but I know for a lot of people it seems tacky to care about money or talk about money. But the thing is, I'm trying to build up a ministry here where I can be of prolonged service to the people called Methodist, and that takes money. So I was really pleased with, I'll go ahead and do it now. Anytime that I broadcast, I told people who I am, and then I told them that they could find me on Substack, and a bunch of people actually went and found me on Substack. I pointed them to my personal Substack. I pointed them to my professional, or the Plain Spoken podcast. This is where I published all the Plain Spoken stuff. And a bunch of people went, and a number of people subscribed. And if you're one of them, I just want to say thank you. There's a free subscriber, and I never paywall, but there are a lot of people who said, I'm gonna pay him some money, and so that's made a big difference for me. So thank you. And then I did point some other people to my locals, and that's slowly growing. And then a number of people just went to the church website, nowataMethodists.org, and they just gave directly there. So it was a very good use of my time. It's really incredible the way that so many people were appreciative and showed that appreciation. And so there's a little bit more to say. And if you but I'm noticing the comments piling up. So I'm going to deal with some comments, address some comments, and then I'll say a little bit more about what transpired over the last 3 weeks since we last spoke. So, um, yes, I've done a number of interviews lately, and I'll point you to the ones that I released this week. But the one I did with Scott Jones is really good. He actually was able to come into this studio and sit down with me, and that was really nice. Glad to have you with us, Mark. Jonathan, I really appreciate all the appreciation shown me. There's been a lot of people that just said, well, the next thing I was going to say was I get the impression that this is something that a number of people would really benefit from, not just in the UMC and not just in the GMC, but in a lot of denominations. I really want to do that again. So I've enlisted the services of a lawyer who's going to help me figure out where the boundary lines are here. If there's a way to get the United Methodist Church to withdraw its copyright claim, because I don't want it. I don't like being one strike away from getting canceled. I need to figure out where the lines of the law are here, because it would be really great to do it for the PCUSA when they get together. It'd be great to do it for a lot of other denominations and be able to bring on some of their people to know what's going on. So anyway, hopefully I'm going to figure that out, and that might be something that I can do to buttress the channel a bit and learn more about how different denominations get business done. So many who watched the general conference in the comments were like, "Oh my gosh, we cannot do things this way in the Global Methodist Church. How are we going to do things?" And for those of you who are concerned about that, let's see. I did a video. Let me just go ahead and plug my videos that I've done here. Um, oh, and while I'm thinking about it, if any of you are on Facebook or other social media and you want to promote this live stream right now, if you'd take a moment just to go to, I don't know, Friends of the Global Methodist Church or other groups that you're a part of where there are people that would enjoy this, feel free to just drop a link and invite your friends to join in. So this video right here with the map on it, I published this morning, preparing for the GMC General Conference Part 1. I'm wanting to give good coverage to that. And so TJ and I sat down and went through the document that is spelling out how the GMC plans on doing its general conference. Today I wrote Diane Burnett, who is the primary communications officer for the whole denomination, just saying, hey, I really want to give coverage to the general conference. Let me know, how I can do that and work with you guys. I never want to be like just an arm of the denomination. I think independent reporting. I'm not really a journalist, but I think it's important to have people that will tell you the truth because they're not getting a paycheck from whoever they're reporting on. So I'm going to try and figure that out with Diane and see if there's a way that I can cover them well in a way. I was not sympathetic to the United Methodist Church. I spent a lot of time and energy explaining how it was that they lost track of the gospel and how it was they betrayed their heritage and how their motivating ideology is not from the Bible but is neo-Marxist, postmodern wokeism. I used a lot of words. And I think I wasn't lying. I think I was right, but also, if I were them, I wouldn't want me talking about them either. So hopefully the Global Methodist Church wants me talking about them. I'm actually going to be providing some legislation. Hopefully I'll show it to you here in a little bit. But I want to hop back on comments for a second. Oh, hey, Dan. Good to see you, man. And Sarah. Oh, you watched our worship? Yeah. So in worship, I have a small church and I don't take myself real seriously. So there's a young couple in the church with a baby. I married them like 3 years ago. And then they have a newborn baby that the church was able to baptize on Easter. And the couple let me know, hey, you hold your baby whenever you have a baby. I've had several babies. We're about to have a fifth baby in July. They said, you can hold our baby anytime you want. So I in the last couple services, have walked over and grabbed their baby and just held her during the service. So I'm glad you enjoyed that. I really enjoy having children in the service, and having babies in particular is just wonderful. Jeff says, John Stevens of Chapelwood made a comment that he is self-described traditionalist and said General Conference was great and he was pleased with the result. Well, then either he is a liar or he's just a very confused person. So, but I don't know John Stevens at all. So, but there's just no way a person can make that statement. I have no idea what he would mean by traditionalist. That at that point, like the word loses any kind of meaning. Mark says the conference was shocking but not surprising, or maybe it was surprising but not shocking. I can't make up my mind. Yeah, I don't know. Like everybody knew it was coming. I knew that it was a long shot that I was going to impact anything, but I was shocked. I was shocked that progressives had no shame whatsoever about steamrolling Africans, or they had no desire to even make it seem like they were throwing them a bone or anything. They were just so happy to dominate the whole thing. Um, it's kind of like I don't. This will be offensive, but it's like these men that decide that they're women and play women's sports and just dominate them. Like the notion is, oh, this is fair. We're on testosterone or we're on estrogen, and we're going through a change. But no, I mean, like the deck has been stacked in your favor. There is no way this is a fair competition. I I wonder how many people I just offended, but it's the truth. Like the general conference was not a reflection of the denomination. The delegates were very much stacked in favor of progressives. There's no one thinks that assembly represents the grassroots of the denomination. It was perfectly stacked in the favor of progressives. So, Forbes Matanga got up on the floor of General Conference and said as much on the last day. They didn't care. They didn't care at all. So the lack of conscience, the lack of discernment, it is amazing how far gone a lot of those people are and how seared their consciences are. Paul says, hey, would the results of the General Conference be different if the African delegates and disaffiliating church delegates were present? I kind of think I know the answer. The ones who really know the answer are Keith Boyette and Tom Lambrecht, and they were of the mind they probably could have stopped regionalization because that required a 2/3 vote, but they probably wouldn't have stopped the denomination changing the sexual ethics, the simple majority vote stuff. The amazing thing was there were several amazing things, but one of them was that they were finally able to compromise the African vote. Um, and it's not just Mande Muyombo, but he did apparently replace some of the elected delegates with family members and sympathetic people to him. But there were other delegations, like one of them. Here was something interesting. Can I pull this up real quick? Well, it's not showing. Well, let me try again. One second. Okay, I think you can see this. This is a letter from Bishop Niwatiwa. I think I said that right. He is the bishop at Zimbabwe, obviously. And he gave a sermon on the floor of General Conference that was appalling to me. It was blatantly like, why would we leave the United Methodist Church? Look at all the money they've given us. Look at all the things they've built for us. We would be idiots to leave them. Anyone who cares about sexuality that much is a fool. Like he said these things. I'm paraphrasing, but his demeanor was just insulting towards traditionalists. He's like, I think the saying is, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You just take the dang gift horse. And so he talked about some of these things. He says, where they lifted the ban on homosexuality, for us Africans, we never will. And then he talked about some advances that they made in Zimbabwe. They got a number of officials on denominational bodies, and he's happy. So that's the thing that really was shocking to me, was how many Africans really are not bothered by selling out Christian sexual ethics. Like, for anyone who's read the Bible, it's a big deal. That the things that we do with our bodies, sexually and otherwise, mattered greatly. And so to find even Africans now losing that discernment because the power of money is so great, I mean, that can be the only explanation. Power and money can be the only explanation. And so now, well, I don't need to talk about that yet. But anyway, Yeah, I think everything got so compromised. There was such a prolonged effort on the part of the institution wielding power and money for its own benefit that it would have been miserable anyway. Yeah, for the longest time, I was sympathetic to Ryan Ackerman, Redeem Zoomer, conservatives staying and thinking, in the long game, we could have taken over and won. It just took better fighting. And now increasingly, I'm thinking, well, and what I'm bringing over to the GMC is if you do not have firm measures to remove people, then the nature of leftist ideology is that they're going to stay, they're going to antagonize, they're going to ruin everything if you can't remove them. And so, because the United Methodist Church did not have the means to remove, I mean, I know they tried to beef it up, but they didn't. I mean, until you can like summarily dismiss somebody without spending right now, I mean, it's still in the United Methodist Church. If someone gets brought up on charges, you're looking at $1 million or at least $100,000 to go through the whole trial process. That is not feasible. That's not feasible. So I'm hoping that the Global Methodist Church puts measures in place to um, keep the denomination somewhat pure. Otherwise, you're going to have the same kind of activism that poisons the body. And once it gets in, there's nothing you can do about it. So if you didn't see it, I did an interview with Lucas Curcio of the channel's Method Ministries. Um, and we talked about this dynamic almost the whole time about like, why is it that traditional conservatism doesn't really operate the same way as liberalism? It's because they're different ideologies with different principles that have different levels of tolerance for adversity. So anyway, now the last few days, at least while I've been thinking about this, I'm thinking, well, okay. So did you watch? Here, I'll show you my screen again. Did you watch the interview I did with Mark Tooley? Uh, that is, I put it up 2 days ago. Not as many people have watched that. Only 1,500 on YouTube, and I realize there's still people watching on other places, but YouTube's kind of my main squeeze. But he talked about how liberalism made its way into the denomination 100 years ago, and ever since it claimed the seminaries and the general boards and agencies, really it was an inevitable thing eventually. um, the only thing that could have stopped it is a strong man, someone jumping in and just bullying them out of their positions and having a hostile takeover. But that's so against the culture of Methodism, which is kind of funny because that's exactly the kind of leadership that John Wesley and Francis Asbury had. Like they were strong men, and they were righteous strong men. But this is part of the reason that people are drawn to people like Donald Trump and Bolsonaro and these very charismatic, bullheaded leaders. That's the only disposition that can hypothetically win against far leftism that just doesn't take no for an answer. And so there are a lot of people who just look at that and go, surely there's another way. And I find myself going, okay, well, what does that other way look like? Because the reasonable conservatism of Reagan, of Tooley, of Rob Renfro, if you didn't see that interview, that was yesterday's, and a lot of you have seen that one. That's 7.6 thousand views. That's pretty good. They were statesmen. Tom Lambrecht, I spoke with him yesterday. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to publish that tomorrow. I'm waiting back to hear from him. If not tomorrow, then Monday or Tuesday. But these guys were very respectable, very conscientious, very fair, compromising in a good way. And yet, this is the end product of that approach. So, if that approach doesn't work, then the only approach that might work is a very bullheaded, very charismatic, strongman approach. So that's for those of you for whom people who like Trump are just a mystery. How can you love Jesus and love Trump? Well, it's because, the church and the state are not the same. And when you have an ideological war going on, and the only way to beat back wokeism is a strong man, then, Donald Trump is as sociopathic as it gets. The guy is just a force. So, and that's not to say that I'm not voting because here's something that is going to make you all hate me. I don't vote. I've just never found a way to do it in good conscience. I don't judge you if you vote, but I've just never had it in me to take a side in these political matters. And I know for some people, it's like that's the most Christian thing you can do is take a side, and I just haven't found a way to do it where I can feel good about it. So anyway, I my job, as I understand it, is to understand other people and ideologies and find what good I can affirm, but also articulate what's fundamentally wrong with those things. So um, I I just understand there's a difference between the church and the state. So no matter what the state does, I mean, it matters, but in the end, like it's not a reflection of my faith. It's not a reflection of what God is doing. God's going to do what He's going to do, regardless of who's in office. So I'm not threatened. Still got 103 people with us online, so I haven't screwed up too bad yet. Do you like the conversation with Rob Renfro? Thank you. Yes, he's a fantastic guy. If you can't tell, we like each other, so it's hard for us to stop talking. It was a good thing that he had an appointment he had to go do. Hey, Karen, I want to think that because we're a small rural church, that all this doesn't matter and I can continue to attend my church. All this won't matter, but it does. And Karen, this is why I started Plain Spoken. Is I'm doing ministry in a small rural town, northeastern Oklahoma, called Nowata, county seat. The city has 3,300 people in it. Tiny, right? My church we have maybe up to 60 on a Sunday morning here. It's a tiny rural setting, but I was doing ministry in the town, and everywhere I was dealing with people who are drinking this toxic sludge that everybody in our country is drinking because they all watch the same TV shows, watch the same movies, play the same video games, listen to the same music. It's all garbage. And I was tired of dealing with these people whose diet is sludge and then trying to make disciples out of them. Like, I'm still doing it. I'm not any more successful than I was before, but I wanted to go up to the headwaters and try and do some battle with these ideas and hit a bigger audience and do battle there. And it's going okay. Like I started off wanting to give this report on the Plain Spoken Project. It's going well. It's going well. I'm very encouraged. My brother was talking to me yesterday. He was going, how are you going to stay humble now that you're a YouTube celebrity? And he was being a little bit facetious. Um, Regardless of how big I get, there are two things that keep me humble. Three, I'm married to a wife who's not at all impressed with that stuff and kids that don't care about it. Two, I'm surrounded by a church in a town who don't care about that at all. They don't care about it at all. They couldn't care less. But third, there are a lot of people on YouTube that get big that are just not at all impressive. I just don't think it speaks to anyone's character or integrity or anything to get big on YouTube. In fact, a lot of times it's just who's best at making clickbait. And so I'm not trying to get big. I really am just trying to serve the church. I really am just trying to spread good information and help people. And especially in these small rural churches, coming back to Karen here, Karen is having to reckon with the fact, for the longest time, local churches have been able to just ignore whatever the general conference does. And you can't ignore it right now. You're not going to be able to ignore it. We're all connected. It's been affecting you for years, even if you didn't know how or why. Now it's quite explicit. It's on all the major news outlets, and everybody knows that the United Methodist Church is a joke. You're not going to be able to get away from the brand. You're not going to be able to get away from, relationally, I believe in this unseen layer of life. We're all connected, and that our covenant relationships impact us. And so I don't think like the GMC is like the pure kingdom of heaven on earth and UMC is a church of Satan. I'm not that black and white, but there are a ton of churches that have said we got out of the UMC and we joined the GMC, and lots more people are showing up right now. And you could blame that on all kinds of things, but I think part of it is when you are not tainted in your covenant relationships through a, a a really gross denomination, that has a number. When you're no longer connected, I think it has a number of benefits. So, and then the reason you're feeling icky now is because when you're tied to someone icky, you feel icky because you're not a sociopath, and because even if you are, you're all connected, and what they do impacts you. So it's not fair, but it is the way that life works. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate you. Hey, Andrew. Oh, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you. Jeff Harrison says the watch parties for thank you. It really was fun. It was a great time. This is not a bad. We got 111 people right now. This is really quite nice. Tim, will you ever know for sure whether you broke copyright? I'm hopefully going to get to the bottom of it with this lawyer. It's going to take me a couple $100, but when I talked to them on the phone, they said they'll come up with some language for me to attach to my videos later on. If I do have to change anything, I will change it. But then I'll have some language associated with it where hopefully they will be more reluctant to pick a fight with me in the future. Nathan says, you don't need money if people donate food, clothing, shelter, and whatever else you need. In short, you either need the money or the necessities money buys. That's true. Nathan's getting ordained here in the Nazarene Church here pretty quick. I forget which day it was, but congratulations to you, brother. Greetings, Olga from Pennsylvania. Steve, I don't think the traditionalists and African delegates could have changed the outcome of the recent conference. The Council of Bishops managed to the entire process, apparently preventing Africans from being seated. Yeah, and if you didn't keep up, at least a quarter of the African delegation was missing. And it just so happened to be from the most conservative, most stringent areas of the United Methodist Church in Africa. So it was pretty icky. David, what's his last name? Livingston, got the whole assembly to compel the Credentials Committee to issue a report on what exactly happened, and they eventually gave it, and it had no names, no dates, no specifics. They blamed it all on the Africans, and they were bitter the whole time. It was just, there was very little that could have gone worse. It was just a terrible thing. You'd be great on the Southern Baptist Conference coming up in June. I agree. I would love to cover the Southern Baptists. There are a number of people in the Southern Baptist Convention that I listen to regularly, so I know a little bit about what's going on. I would love to cover that, but we'll see if I can't make it happen. Mr. Blango, Reverend Blango, the UMC GC showed what is wrong with the institutional church. I pray the GMC doesn't get so rules and issue invested that the work of the church and real grassroots ministry isn't even discussed. Yeah, that's going to be, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to lose my mind if it goes anywhere in that same area. If you watch the video that I put out this morning, we did notice, TJ and I, that there is still room for there to be resolutions made from the General Conference. I'm just really hoping that the Global Methodists have the good sense to know what is a helpful resolution to have and what is just empty virtue signaling. Because in the end, whenever the Tom Lambrecht video comes out, one of the questions I asked him is, I came away thinking that the General Conference just showed that they are now in lockstep with the furthest left wing of the Democrat Party. I said, tell me I'm being hyperbolic or dramatic. And he said, no, that's pretty much what they did. So if that's what the GMC turns into, I can't have it. Nothing against Democrats, little bit against Democrats. But I just, Democrat, it's not a religion. It's a political party. We have better things to do. God help us. The convening conference better be a very different thing. So I'm right there praying that with you, Blango. There have been people ask me if the Considering Charlotte crew is going to do anything else. And the answer is yes. I got a series of text messages today from Lonnie and Odell and Joe. Joe is in Italy. He'll be getting back next Friday. But he said, you know what? We'll talk next Friday. So we'll have a wrap up. I'll try and get Simon Mafunda back with us, and we'll see what there is left to be said. Odell said he's got a lot left to say, so I might just sit back and let Odell talk because I like his voice better anyway. Greg says hi from Phoenix. He's usually in Maryland, but that guy travels, doesn't he? He was at the General Conference, and he was helping me make sure that I knew what was going on. So thank you, Greg. Glad you're with us today. Hey, Sonia. Steve said this was a bishop's decided outcome, and most others could have stayed home. Look how they treated Jerry Kula and others, cutting them off and sending them to their seats. It really was very shameful the way that they treated the conservative African delegates. The very worst one was Bishop Graves from Alabama, West Florida, and that's when Jerry Kula got up and spoke, wasn't it? Um, it's all fuzzy in my head now, but I remember Jerry had the Bible and he was lifting it up, and the chair at the time, I think it was Graves, said, "What does that have to do with this?" It's just so god awful embarrassing. I really felt, and he wasn't the only one disrespected. There were probably a good 4 or 5 that were mistreated by the presiding bishop, and of course that would have an impact on how willing African delegates were to get up after that. It was just really shameful. Jerry says, if it wasn't for you, I would not have watched the general conference. Best coverage I've ever seen, including the 5 general conferences I attended. It really does require some commentary to keep up with, right? You know, half the time I feel like I was just going, wait, what just happened? What did they do with that motion? And then people in the comments would fulfill it. So it's just, it's meant to be, it's meant to be a group affair. And so, yeah, I was really glad we did it. Hey, Justin. Hey, Holly. Oh, thank you. I think you were talking about my trans metaphor from 20 minutes ago. So glad it applied at least for you. Hey, Monty. When the disciples were arguing who is the greatest, Jesus pointed to a child and said, "Children are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." As you said, it's great to have children in worship. It's wonderful, and let me tell you guys, I try not to brag when I talk about this, but I've got a crew of 9 kids that get here on Thursdays, and we go through the New City Catechism, and they memorize these answers. We're about to have the whole book memorized. We're on question 50 out of 52. And they deal with general faith questions. So whenever I'm preaching, there will be topics I come close to that we have catechism questions and answers. So I'll ask the kids a question and they've memorized an answer, and it it is so wonderful for the adults in particular to get preached at by the children in the sanctuary. I feel like a genius for doing it this way, but there's no reason why I should be the only one doing it. If you are not catechizing your kids in your churches, whether you're United Methodist, Global Methodist, Independent, whatever, it is such a gift to the body. I highly recommend it. So it's not just babies, it's all children. It's a wonderful thing to do. Duncan saved me yesterday. Somebody was impersonating me on YouTube and trying to fund some ministry somewhere else. Duncan filed a report against him, turned me on to it. Thank you, Duncan. I hope nobody got fooled out of some money. Saying, hey, from North Georgia of the GMC. And then I did hear really good things about your convening conference over there. I don't remember if it was you or somebody else wrote me and just said it was a fantastic gathering. Holly says people have been criticizing the remnant that left and did not fight. This was a fight that would not have been worth it. It was a foregone conclusion. The UMC is a dead sect now. It's been really sad for me to watch. You know, there are people. I'm of the mind. So there are some people that can't we all just get along? You know, the United Methodists love Jesus, the Global Methodists love Jesus. You know, we just are brothers and we need to go our separate ways. I don't see it that way. I think that the United Methodist Church is serving a different Jesus, a different gospel. I think we're different religions. That said, I think there are conservative, faithful, traditionalist people that wanted to stay and fight, or they just wanted to be faithful and they didn't want to leave until the covenant actually got changed. And I've been really sad to see conservatives saying, we told you, you should have left with us, and now you got what's coming to you. And I don't feel good about that at all. I don't think it was a sin for them to hold out hope that the UMC would have a conscience. And I haven't felt good about the bitterness I've seen from those who are now trapped and just going, well, you left us behind. It would have gone different if you'd stayed with us. That sort of thing is not good. I have the thing I do want to correct is people who got out and they just don't care about who's left behind. I think you're a real world class jerk if you're like that. If you just don't care about those who got left behind, I don't know what's wrong with you. You're feeling the wrong way. You should repent. You know, Our hearts should not be hardened towards one another. We should have all kinds of compassion. And I've been getting emails left and right now from people going, my church, we didn't even know about this until just recently. I discovered your content. It's great, but it's too little too late. What on earth do I do right now? So I'm going to be interviewing Scott Field of the WCA. He's been getting more emails than I have, of course, I'm going to be interviewing him on Monday and just learning about the different churches and feeling trapped and if there are any other options. So if you don't know it, there were a number of annual conferences that made promises to local churches in their conferences that, depending on what happened at the general conference, if there was a decision made, a change made that they couldn't live with, then they would come back to disaffiliation and make that an option. And what happened at the general conference was they closed the door on disaffiliations. There is no more disaffiliation provision, but it seems that there are some annual conferences that are going to make good on those promises. The ones I can talk about, Holston Annual Conference has already released a document saying that they would. And then Bishop Beard put something out saying something to that effect. And then I had People Need Jesus pulled up over here. And right at the top, he had another one or two. Let's see if I can't find South Carolina. I think trustees are discerning the best use of God's grace. So I don't know if they've given a final yes or no, but if there is to be any disaffiliation, it's going to be specially designed by annual conferences using either paragraph 2549 or I don't know what else they would use. I think that's the only provision they could potentially use, and that's actually not disaffiliation. That's closing the church down and selling it back to them under certain conditions. So it's a very fraught time. If I don't remember at the end, and I don't know how I'd forget, but one of the most important prayers you can say right now is for churches that are left behind and trapped, and some of them are in friendly conferences that are going to let them out. A lot of them are in hostile conferences. I got a private email today from someone in the California Pacific Annual Conference. They used to work higher up, and they were telling me right now they know for a fact that churches already are being seized and sold for millions of dollars by the annual conference. They are not going to let anyone disaffiliate. They're going to take these congregations for all they're worth. So something I've been meaning to say is, a lot of people have said, well, the general conference is over now and it's all sealed. I guess you're not going to be talking about them anymore. And no, I'm going to keep talking about them. I'm going to talk about the Global Methodist Church. I'm going to talk about broader Christian topics. But I'm as the United Methodist Church continues to uh, declare exigent circumstances and close churches down against their will and sell their properties to keep themselves afloat, I'm going to chronicle every single one that I can, just so those who are watching know the price that got paid by these innocent churches to stroke the egos of these elitist um, people with luxury beliefs. So if it didn't become clear to you during my coverage, they are making a decision as an American church to isolate themselves. This was what regionalization was: isolate themselves, insulate themselves from the global church, and to liquidate rural parts of the United States to focus on urban parts of the United States. That's going to be their strategy. That's why they think they're going to grow, is they're going to give up on all these backwater Hicks and flyover country, and they're going to focus on the elite, um, enlightened people of cities. So we'll see how that works out for them. Paul says, I had friends from the U.S. United Methodist conferences who were told to wait until after General Conference before they disaffiliated. Now what can their church do? So Tom Lambrecht answers that in the conversation that he and I had. So instead of giving his answer right now, you can just watch that when it comes out. He was a delightful guy to talk to. Karen says they can take all they want out of the discipline, but not out of the Bible. That's absolutely true. Jerry, I did see that Mark Tooley interview. I worked with him also on the general church level. It was because of their views that I grew stronger in Methodism. Yeah, yeah. A lot of people, it's been strange to me, because once you come into like this biblical traditionalist worldview, it's like, how was I ever anything other than this? But there's so many people who just can't even conceive of it. They don't even know it exists. They don't see how it all fits together. And they just need to be shown that. And then they're like, oh, yes, this is clearly better than what I've had. And it just takes someone walking through it with them. And I forget that that's what I'm doing a lot of the time. But there were liberals who watched the general conference live stream that I did, and they said, "I'm really enjoying your commentary. It's really fitting a lot of things together for me, and I don't agree with everything, but I'm really glad I'm watching this right now." And that's so cool to me. I don't know. I hope I persuade some. I hope a lot of people listen to me and go, "Oh, this is clearly how things are supposed to be." Which, by the way, I need to plug another thing. I know I'm just promoting myself all the time, but I hope it's for your good as well. This is the series that I'm doing right now in my Substack. This is at jeffreyrickman.substack.com. And a couple weeks ago, I did What Methodism Needs to Be. I showed this list of 12 distinctives that the global Methodist Church needs to claim and hold on to. I would have all Methodist Wesleyan strains claim these 12 things. And then I published the first one last week that Methodists prioritize the primitive and the universal, and I explained what that meant. So if you haven't gone and read that yet, I think it's worthy. Of course, something better could be written. I'm not an academic and I'm not like the best writer, but I'm okay. It's readable. And I hope it helps you think through these things and reclaim some things. I'm going to be publishing the next one tomorrow. And I think I'm calling it, oh, heck, I'm calling it Christians are, I don't want to give away too much. I don't want to show you my stats yet. The second one is Methodists understand themselves to be justly condemned sinners outside of the substitutionary atoning work of Christ Jesus. So I'm going to offend a lot of people with that one. I already know. Consider my words. If you haven't already, go and sign up for my Substack, and hopefully that'll be of benefit to you. Duncan says the average Zimbabwean household lives on $57 a month, so their bishop is paid about 300 times that and is funded by United States delegates, and that's called a misalignment of incentives. Yeah, it's very much a worthy conversation to have how much clergy should get paid in relation to the people they're serving and the clergy they serve around. And I'm hoping the Global Methodists can have that conversation in earnest. Holly says, I hold my nose and vote for the best person for the country. Yeah, that's what everybody's doing this year, isn't it? Chris says, following the General Conference in 2004, there was talk of an amicable separation by some leaders in Good News. There was pushback by some in the right middle who created a statement of unity ever since. Yeah. That's true. And I see there were a couple follow-up comments. There was no real unity. We missed the chance to do that when we had a lot more control. This was led by Bill Hinson. And of course, that's a little before my time. I can't really talk. I don't know much or anything about Bill Hinson. But so something a lot of people don't understand, and this is secondhand knowledge. I was born in 1984, okay? But I've read a number of historians who say that the 20th century was really an exceptional time, historically speaking. Whether you're talking about American history or world history, it was this very odd time where after World War II, there was this middle ground, consensus, mainstream identity that was formed that really the extremes of right and left were nowhere to be found in the public sector, and everybody was just kind of getting along in this Norman Rockwell. And I realized, yes, there are some voices. Yes, there was racism. Yes, there was social anxiety and upheaval, but there was this time where it was a reasonable thing for people to expect for a church to be a place of peace and for people to get along and for there to be shared unity and a common fabric. And that's never been a reasonable thing to expect, but it was seen enough in the 20th century that people came to expect it. And now it's all falling apart because that's just a very artificial thing. But the leadership that was formed in the mid 20th century, they just took that for granted and they expected that and they trusted that everything was all going to work out. And now, yes, hindsight's 2020 and they seem silly to us, but for the longest time that peace, that unity seemed, I mean, when you read about the formation of the United Methodist Church and someone as intelligent as Albert Outler, who made something as stupid as the Wesleyan Quadrilateral and was okay with the statement on pluralism, it was just so self-evidently stupid, but they were just blind at that time by this optimism that just wasn't in touch with human nature. So, hindsight's 2020. It is important to look back and say, who the players were and who's responsible and what stupid things were said. But it's much more important that we, as King David said in the Psalter, Lord, protect me from hidden faults. What are the things that 20, 30, 40 years down the line, they're going to look back and say, that Jeffrey Rickman, he was such an idiot. He said this stuff on air. We've got the records right here. And look at what he contributed to here. If we don't think that we're doing something the same right now in the GMC. Starting off with some stupid optimism or too much faith in ourselves or in our structures, then we need an ounce of that humility as well. So, Chris, your point is very well taken. Thank you for that. Matthew's here and saw that I acknowledged him. Very good. Thank you so much, brother. Yeah, the small rural church is where real discipleship happens. I've got stuff. Well, I'm not going to talk about that right now, but it's definitely coming. For those of you in small rural churches, you are going to like me. Big city churches, you might like me for some reasons, but there will also be tension. Warren says Bishop Arthur Moore was the type of godly strong man you describe, maybe the greatest bishop in Methodism behind Asbury. I would like to know more about that. I honestly know absolutely nothing about him. The only Methodist bishops I've ever heard of and just thought really got it and were awesome were the first two. And then after that, there's some that are great. I loved listening to what's that Mississippi Bishop Sharma Lewis. She gave an awesome sermon at General Conference. There are some that are good at some things, but when we're talking about amazing organizers who have the big picture and are not afraid of offending people for the sake of the gospel, there just haven't been that many. So I would love to learn more about Arthur Moore. Jeff Harrison says, this was 100% my church's story. Once we left, we had many visitors say, we know who you are because you left the UMC. Yeah, there are a lot of people. I mean, I will help. People will come and need gas money. I'll go to the gas pump with them. And I've had it happen several times where they're going, okay, y'all are Methodist church. Are you that kind of Methodist? Like, do y'all have rainbow flag? I didn't see a rainbow flag when I went in, but are y'all these crazy ones that hate Jesus? They'll say things like that. I'll be like, no, obviously no. But that's what they know about Methodists. Like, that's the cultural. We think people don't pay attention. They don't pay attention to the fine details and the nuance. They just figure out, okay, who's on what side? Okay, the United Methodists, the Methodists, they're far gone. Yeah, they're crazy. And it's really hard to come back from that. And that's what we're trying to do. Duncan talked to Karen there, so I'm going to skip over that. George, have you ever considered doing a podcast about home churches? Since some former Methodists are not closely located to a GM church. So, George, this is an interesting topic because I've had a number of people reach out to me saying, I want to go to a global Methodist church. There is not one near me. Or I'm looking at this one, it's too far away. We don't have a clergy. Or I've had a number of people also say, we have a church that wants to go GMC. We can't find a pastor. Or we are a GM church and we can't find a pastor. Or we want to plant one. There are all these scenarios. And the embarrassing thing is, we don't even know we should be embarrassed about this, but the first 100 years of Methodism, there was no missionary society. There was no a church planting operation. And yet Methodism grew leaps and bounds. Well, how do you do that if you haven't organized it? Well, it turns out you just had all these people sold out for Jesus. Whenever they moved, they just built a church wherever they went. They weren't trained for it. They weren't equipped for it. They just trusted the Lord. Wherever they went, they started a Wesleyan class meeting. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm always plugging this book, The Class Meeting by Kevin Watson. This is where you discover your Methodist DNA. They would just plant that wherever they went, and then a church would grow out of that. And so whenever I wrote Diane Burnett today, it was primarily about how can I cover General Conference, but I also said, I'm noticing a lot of people just need a network to plug into. They want to plant a church, they just don't know how. And I don't think there's a science to it. I think you just need to know that other people have got your back and to compare notes with other people. So I've wanted to start like a weekly community aimed at just taking people who are starting house churches, starting class meetings, trying to plant a global Methodist church where they are, and then just network them with each other and encourage them. So if that's something that interests you, Pray about it. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could put that together and not wait on denominational superstructure and clergy, but just let the laity do what needs to get done to bring people to Christ? I just think that'd be wonderful. Well, hey, Helena, good to see you. Helena was one of the regulars with the live stream during General Conference, so I'm glad you're with us, sister. Yeah, I'm glad you're interested too. Yeah, it should be up in a week and a half, I'm sure. Hey, Blake, Allie Beth Stuckey. Oh wait, you're someone who knows Allie Beth Stuckey. Well, that's interesting. She had the best tagline on the United Methodist General Conference. It was United Methodist Church changes its pronouns to was, were. I thought that was so clever because if you didn't keep up with it at the General Conference, every single person had to introduce themselves by name, where they were from, what their rank was. That's all normal. But then they had to say their sex, male, female, and non-binary, whatever, and their race. Um, and then it was also, they asked them to say their age, and they had 5 different age groups that they were expected to articulate. So, and a lot of people volunteered their pronouns because that's this, as I explained at the time, there's an ideology around individualism and identity that leftism is contingent upon, and that's what Stuckey was claiming. So anyway, Blake, very interesting. Allie Beth Stuckey's a big voice in conservatism right now, and I like her. Yeah, it makes a lot of us sick to know what happened. I mean, like there were just really icky points where I felt icky. Duncan says, but now that we're out and we're able to watch the UMC General Conference, I realized that I was not in a fog. No, I was in a fog. We cannot remain in covenant with clergy who promote openly against God's basic plan for man. Yeah, that's a basic form of discernment that the United Methodist Church, it really just fogs. It smudges things. They get you really unclear and demoralized. So you just feel like, it's not really worth it. And then once you get out, you're like, man, I'm really glad I did. When you don't have to compromise your soul anymore to that degree, it feels great. It really does feel good. Hey, Lawrence, good to see you, man. D says, I wish the GMC would not take amendments from the floor, at least at convening General Conference. It's just counterproductive at this early stage. Yeah. I've very rarely seen it go well. But it's just hard to believe that it's conciliar government if the council can't change anything. So I don't know. I don't know how to do that. But D, I totally understand why you feel that way, because 90% of the time, at least when they're trying to spitball something on the floor of plenary, it just gets bogged down. And yeah, it's not fun. Yeah, I hope we avoid that. You're right, Sarah. Yes. Reverend Ross says, what's the first annual conference following General Conference? Baltimore, Washington is usually prior to Memorial Day weekend. You're talking about in the United Methodist Church, and I have no idea. I have no idea. Hey, Paul, I wondered if you were going to be with us today. I've missed you in the time away. So, and you're watching my Sunday services as well. Yeah, someday we'll find a way to get a microphone on the congregation so y'all can hear the responses, but so it doesn't feed back into the sound system and they hear themselves, so I'm sure there's a way to do it. I think it involves spending more money on more hardware, but it really does make a big difference. Yeah, the New City Catechism. So yeah, it is from a Reformed group, but it's honestly great because it's set to music. They have long and short answers. It's much more geared towards children. The GMC Catechism is not really geared towards children. I'm obviously leading my daughter through it. If you haven't seen that series, my 7-year-old is going through that. She's about to be 8. That's a really good series, and we are going to use the GMC Catechism, but we started on the New City Catechism before the GMC Catechism even came out, and it really is just awesome for kids. And the children's music is actually really good quality. They have jazz saxophone. They have jazz flute. It's not all jazz, but I mean that's the instrument. The one we just learned had a harmonica, so it's just really It's a fantastic production. So and they only have like 2 or 3 answers that John Wesley really wouldn't like, and that's still okay. You can just correct that in the children's understanding, and you're just providing a framework for them. So it ain't the Bible. Is there a way for churches to still leave? Depends on your annual conference. They're figuring that stuff out right now, but there are a lot of places that really don't have any hope. Lawrence says, I'll probably leave when they force us to merge with our other church in our district. Yeah, there are different people that'll have a different point of leaving. Yeah, there's a good question to be asked. How many people are even going to be in worship this Sunday in United Methodist churches? And is there going to be any way to figure out how many people have left anytime before the stats are reported for annual conference? Odds are it's going to be about a year and a half before we figure out how bad the loss right now actually is. Katie's mom says, I have been in the UMC for pretty much my entire life. The decisions that were made are forcing me to leave a place where I felt safe and sane in this crazy world. Yeah, the crazy world got in. I'm so sorry. The only words of comfort are you discovered that God exists outside of the United Methodist Church too, and that there is a threat with freedom. There are a lot of people who are leaving and they're just done with covenant associations in the form of denominations altogether. Some of them are just done with church altogether, and that is bad. That's bad. But there are a lot of people who get out and they join the GMC or the Nazarenes or the Wesleyans, and they discover, hey, there is a way for me to do this without compromising my conscience. And it's a wonderful thing. And I hope that for you and for everybody else going through that right now. Well, of course, friend. Chris says, on the matter of those who left the fight, I'm wrong. We've been fighting for decades. So many came too late to the fight. Yeah, and that's the case. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Redeemed Zoomer and Young Methodist for Tradition, they're the young people right now that haven't been in the fight. And it's real easy for them to say, well, you didn't do it the right way. And, I mean, I partly sympathize with them. I mean I meant what I said a little while ago, where the fighting was very much conditioned by the politics of 1970s conservatism, which was very reasonable and statesmanlike. But also, I don't know. I don't know how things would have gone if you could take the young people now and put them back in time, knowing what we know now. Maybe they would have done better. There's just no way to know. But what we do know is that people did fight the best that they knew how at the time. And they did more than anybody can know, because a lot of negotiations they did, a lot of the work they did was under the condition of confidentiality. And, I've had a number of people I've talked to over the last year in my capacity that we don't put it on camera, but they say, you can never put this on camera. You can never tell people this. But here are these things said and done behind the scenes that people would love to know, but I can never speak publicly about it. So a lot of them fought really hard. And at this point in time, it looks like they didn't because they lost. But I mean, that's the awful thing about history. That's the awful thing about memory, is we only remember how things turned out and not all the developments along the way. So, oh yeah, yeah, I can see why someone would draw that connection. Oh my gosh, it's already 5:00. There's so many things. My German friend Katrin joined us. And I'm glad you like my house church idea. Yeah, that was a really fun, exciting thing about the live stream as well, was how many people joined from overseas. People from the African continent, people from Europe. That was a wonderful thing. So, Katrin, I don't know how you say your name in German. Very glad to have you here today. That's wonderful. I'm so glad you're with us, Blango. I feel bad I'm not going to be able to hit everybody's comments. I had some other things that I wanted to talk about today. There's never enough time. I could talk for forever. Yeah, the link. I didn't even ever change my screen back to full screen. Here, I'll show you my website, nowadaMethodists.org. That's my church right there. I took that photo. Isn't that pretty? and that's me talking to the camera. And that's my daughter, Susanna, when she was probably 4. Anyway, it's obviously a really small, beautiful church that I'm very blessed to serve. So thanks to those of you who have prayed for my church, joined my church for worship. Let me be clear. I would love to have y'all join us for worship online or in person. But listen, here's the thing. The church is always meant to be interrelational, mutually vulnerable, accountable to one another. You can't do that on a screen. So live stream worship is good just for figuring out what's important to you, what to consider in picking a church close to you. But I never, ever want to keep any of you from engaging in a local church where you are. You have to find a faithful local church. And if you can't find one, then you have to build one because this faith is meant to be shared with people that you can look into their eyes and you can shake their hands and you can hug them and you can do life together. So I'm going to say that prayer for you. I'm going to say a prayer for those left behind. And I'm going to say a prayer for, I think, rural churches. And I'd invite you to be in a spirit of prayer with me. And I'll just invite you also, if you do have stuff to follow up with me about, things that you think I need to report on or know about, stories that I need to, a lot of people just write to tell me their stories. And I do my best to read all of them. I'm at plainspokenpod@gmail.com. You're very welcome to write me. I can't promise that I'll respond. I have 1,000 unread emails in my inbox right now. I'm never going to get caught up. But I do very much enjoy knowing what you guys are seeing and thinking about and praying about. And as long as you can be gracious uh, about me maybe not responding, then please send me an email. I'd love to get one. So let us pray. Father, there's so much information to process. There are so many things going on that are distressing, that are discouraging, that are demoralizing. And Lord, there's nothing I can say to take away from that. I just pray that you would give comfort in the midst of that to people who are making impossibly hard decisions and saying goodbye, some people, to churches that they have been in for decades. It's just a dark time. But Lord, I remember that you work all things for the good of those whom you love. And I think we know that deep down. And we need situations like this sometimes where we have to just lean and trust in you, even if it means leaving everything else behind. So we thank you for the model of Abraham, who left behind his homeland, his people in Ur. We thank you for the models of the saints throughout the scriptures who chose to stick by you even whenever it was dangerous and uncomfortable and they were hated. We remember the words of Jesus that says that the world will hate us because it hated him first. And we know that this world is not our home and this life is not supposed to be comfortable and luxurious, that we are supposed to suffer. So when this suffering comes, Lord, help us to be drawn closer to you in that, because we know that you know what suffering is. We thank you that your son did choose to suffer and die for our sakes, and that the path of suffering leads to green pastures and still waters. So we pray that you would make a way for those left behind, whether they be American or African or Filipino or European. Lord, make a way for them and help them to trust in you in this liminal time of deep discontent. Lord, we want to pray to you. We want your guidance for churches that are striving to serve you, that are striving to build something that will last and make disciples in the way that we should have been. So, Lord, build what needs to be built for house churches to take root, for laity to start making disciples without waiting for clergy. And Lord, may the Methodist movement of tomorrow be of greater strength and integrity than that which came before. We want to honor the legacy and the battle of those who fought, who gave their all and who still lost. And we remember, Father, that the evidence of your love and of your presence is not worldly victory. It's just that we fight the fight well and faithfully, and we thank you for those who have. Lord, we need you right now. So show up, show off, work through us, give us the humility to follow. And if it be your will, let the Methodists be again a people who spread scriptural holiness throughout the land. We ask these things in Jesus' holy name. Amen. Well, friends, it never goes how I plan it, but a plan is something you deviate from. And when we make plans, God laughs. And so God laughed at me today, and I've just been so glad to have y'all with me, all 130 of you. This has been fun. I'll be at it again next Friday, and then stay tuned for some things I'll be posting between now and then on Substack and on YouTube and Facebook. Make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to me wherever you are, and then make sure that other people who need encouragement can be a part of what we're doing as well. And I hope this is something that really does make a big difference in the end. So God bless you. I'm going to go mow the lawn now and hang out with my kids. I'll see you later.